تحياتي على المصطفى المختار خير البرية فيا نافحة الله يا عطفته ويا جاذبات الحق جودي بزورتي صلاة وتسليم وأزكى تحياتي على المصطفى المختار خير البرية ويا نظرات الله يا لحظاته ويا نسمات اللطف أمي بحبتي صلاة وتسليم وأزكى تحياتي على المصطفى المختار خير البرية ويا غارة الرحمن جدي بسرعة إلينا وحل عقد كل ملمة صلاة وتسليم وأزكى تحياتي على المصطفى المختار خير البرية ويا رحمة الرب الرحيم توجهي وأحيي بروح الفضل كل رميمة صلاة وتسليم وأزكى تحياتي على المصطفى المختار خير البرية ويا كل أبواب القبول تفتحي فإن مطايا القصد نحوك أمتي صلاة وتسليم وأزكى تحياتي على المصطفى المختار خير البرية ويا سحب الجود الإلهي أمطيري فإن أكف المحل تلقاك مدتي صلاة وتسليم وأزكى تحياتي على المصطفى المختار خير البرية بحرمات هادينا ومحيي قلوبنا ومرشدينا نهج الطريق القويمة صلاة وتسليم وأزكى تحياتي على المصطفى المختار خير البرية دعنا إلى حق بحق منزل عليه من الرحمن أفضل دعوة صلاة وتسليم وأزكى تحياتي على المصطفى برية أجبنا قبلنا مذعنين لأمره سمعنا أطعنا أنهودا وبصيرة صلاة وتسليم وأزكى تحياتي على المصطفى المختار خير فيا ربي ثبتنا على الحق والهدى يا هو يا الله ويا ربي اقبضنا على خير ملتي يا هو يا الله صلاة على من كان للخلق شافعا يا هو يا الله ونرجو من المولى به أن يسامع يا هو يا الله وعم أصولا والفروع برحمة يا هو يا الله وأهلا وأصحابا وكل قرابتي يا هو يا الله صلاة على من كان للخلق شافعا يا هو يا الله ونرجو من المولى به أن يسامع يا هو يا الله وسائر أهل الدين من كل مسلم يا هو يا الله أقام لك التوحيد من غير ريبة يا هو يا الله صلاة على من كان للخلق شافعا يا هو يا الله ونرجو من المولى به أن يسامع يا هو يا الله وصل وسلم دائم الدهر سرمدا يا هو يا الله على خير مبعوث إلى خير أمتي يا هو يا الله صلاة على من كان للخلق شافعا يا هو يا الله ونرجو من المولى به أن يسامع ياهو يا الله محمد المخصوص منك بفضلك ياهو يا الله عظيم وإنزال الكتاب وحكمتي ياهو يا الله صلاة على من كان للخلق شافعا ياهو يا الله ونرجو من المولى به أن يسامعوا ياهو يا الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم. 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 اللهم محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم. اللهم صل على 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 محمد وعلى سلم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم. 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 اللهم محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم. اللهم صل على 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 آل محمد وسلم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى 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 آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى 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 آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل سلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم 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 اللهم صل على اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم 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 اللهم صل على آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى 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 آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى 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 آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى 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 آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى 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 آل محمد وسلم اللهم على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه
وعلى آله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. بسم الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. So we have now reached session number 5. This is part 2 of the etiquettes of travel. And the only remaining that bullet point that we didn't get to, which we'll cover briefly, is what Imam al Ghazali mentions about intention. And this goes in line because in a sense that it is a type of etiquette. And it also ties into the various reasons for which we travel, or the reasons for which we should travel. And after giving us the various divisions of travel, is the travel, what it falls into it, as they say, ta'tari ahkam al-khams. Travel that correspond to one of 5 legal rulings of the sacred law. It can either be obligatory, it can be recommended, permissible, it can be makruh, disliked, or haram, unlawful. And that the intention relates to the permissible, recommended, and obligatory types of travels. And so that obviously one of the greatest examples of an obligatory type of travel is the Hajj and the Umrah. And of course that has conditions, and that's detailed in the books of fiqh. And then there's a long list. There's a long list of recommended types of travel. And that much of that is what we spoke about in the previous sessions. And then there's also another long list of travels that are permissible. And that with travels that are permissible, the key here is that we make an intention behind it. So one of the things that Imam al Ghazali says here, after that mentioning these 5 different ahkam. So you and I should ask, before we embark upon a travel, what is the legal ruling of this particular travel? Consult a rightly guided teacher, a person of knowledge, and that if scholars differ upon the matter, then that you're free to then incline towards one opinion over the other. But ask that what is the permissibility of this type of travel? And sometimes there are different rulings in relation to the genders for men and for women, and that there's details of these discussions that we're not going to talk about them in an exhaustive sense. If there's any questions, people feel free to ask, and in the interactive sessions we can talk a little bit more about them. But we should just know there's 5 different classifications of travel, and on one side that they get to obligatory, and on the other side there's some that are unlawful, and then there's different travels in between. Now, it's really interesting to know, and this is the Shafi opinion at least, is that traveling merely for nuzha, which is essentially you're just going somewhere to see a place, otherwise known as tourism. Unless there's other intentions that are behind it, they traditionally classified it as makruh, as disliked. And the reason is that they didn't have a conception of travel in the pre-modern world of just doing something for the sake of doing something. There had to be for the most part at least, there had to be a purpose behind it. Now, I'm not saying that you have to cancel, and we're almost on where people have already planned their summer vacations now. And the word vacation includes a lot of different types of things. And I do think it's very important, though, is that we step back as individuals, as families, and as a community, and we put that work in to do what was previously mentioned in the session and this morning, is that we really think deeply about travel. You and I have a limited number of days. What is the best way that we can travel for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In other words, is that we know that there's times where we want to step back from work. We know where we have to take time off. How do we spend that time, and what do we do? And don't just caught up at a surface level. Someone says that, oh, I went to somewhere in the Caribbean and it's beautiful. Oh, I want to go there too. Just think a little bit more deeply. What are you trying to accomplish through travel? What needs, psychological and emotional and spiritual or other, do you have that are deep within you that you might not even be aware of, that you're trying to solve something without realizing you're trying to solve something? And how many people get back and be like, man, I need a vacation from a vacation, because they didn't really think through how it is that they were going to spend that time. And then there's degrees. And I always advise people that one of the greatest ways to spend your vacation time is to take the last 10 days off for Ramadan, Itikaf. Now, you might not be in wherever it is that you might be going on vacation, but that's one of the great ways to spend your vacation time, is solely for the sake of Allah Ta'ala in Itikaf. Now, not everyone might not do that, but there's a long list of things that we can do. And the key is knowing that. I'm not discouraging people from vacations. I'm encouraging people to be principled in vacations. As I mentioned, is that we're not here to make things difficult on people. We want to create a baseline of permissibility and then find ways that everything that we do has meaning. Everything that we do is to draw near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what he's going to talk about now when he talks about intention. And so this requires a little bit of thought, just as it requires knowledge. And if this is something that you decided to do or want to do and feel that this is good, to take your family somewhere, and there's benefit in it, and there's time to spend together while doing so, then make sure that's really what's happening, as opposed to the family traveling and everybody's on their phones and people start arguing and people are angry at each other, and then people get bored, and then parents get mad because you don't want to go to the museums, and all these types of things that end up happening. Right? As a result, plan all these things ahead of time, and that minimize these by putting everything in its proper place. And there's so much that we can potentially, and there's so much more that we can do. And hopefully that there will be people who take this more seriously and facilitate for people. Like, here's an option of something that you can do where it's fulfilling needs that you have. You need to relax. Okay. then if they really need to relax and you have a hectic travel schedule, is that, are you really fulfilling that need? So we got to think deeply, like, why am I traveling? Question yourself. Am I just going on vacation because everyone else is going on vacation? Right? Is there another way to do it? And in general, there are things that the closer we are to nature, for example, and making an intention, it's very easy to turn a travel that involves nature into a recommended travel. You go with the intention of reflecting upon the signs of Allah and creation. Did he not mention as one of the things? As one of the primary reasons that we travel, and that relates to ilm, is that we have incredibly beautiful natural parks in the United States of America and in other places. Well, I'm sure Canada has them as well. And going to visit these parks with this intention, getting to learn. And I remember one time going to Muir Woods, which is in, I think it's in Sausalito, just north of Sausalito in the Bay Area, where we have the big redwood trees, incredibly beautiful. And we were with family, and they wanted to get a tour guide. And I was kind of, I was like, no, let's just do our own thing, right? I grudgingly accepted, but I was so happy that we did the tour guide because it was so informative. And there were so many meanings that you learned. And he started talking about fires and floods, and how that he started saying about how that what do people think about how important fires and floods are for the forests. And he was talking about that because there's so much brush that develops on the forest floor, when the cones from the conifers fall, is that they're not going to go underneath the earth because there's so much brush. It's when fires come through and they burn up the brush, or floods come through and sweep away the brush, that these small little cones then that start to get near the ground, then eventually go into the ground, and then you have, it's a way of reproduction for the trees. And so that just, what a metaphor that you learn, like something that we see as humans as that bad, yani fires and floods, is necessary for growth. And so you can just tie that into, tribulations in your life, and how they're necessary parts of spiritual growth, and on and on and on, and just all of the amazing things that you learn, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides for these incredible things that he's created, these trees, and how big they are. Think about the amount of water that is in them. And then you start learning about what happens when human beings are irresponsible, and how I think it's like only like 2% of the redwoods are left, right? Because they've all been logged. And what ends up happening as a result and so forth, this, you actually end up benefiting tremendously in a religious sense. And you're out in nature. You're trying to replace that what we're oftentimes prevented from in our day-to-day lives, which is being in nature. And as Ustad MJ mentioned, not being able to see the stars, not being in tune. One of the things Imam al Ghazali mentions about one of the ways to determine the Qibla is knowing the directions of the various types of wind. And so if you would ask someone here, where do the winds come from? Winds come from? Well, it just blows. Right? No, like people are used to be in tune with these things. I remember that in Mauritania, is that whenever it would rain, the wind would come from a particular direction. And you would just all of a sudden see like a dark cloud forming in the horizon, and the winds, let's see, that would come from, because they were praying to the east, it would come from the east. And then you would see it coming, and everyone would quickly go back, and they would put all of their things like in their tents, and they kind of hunker down for the wind, because the winds would precede the rain, at least in Mauritania. And you'd have these really violent winds that come through. And then after that, it would just like pour down rain for like 20 minutes, 40 minutes. And then just this natural, it was like the Discovery Channel. It was really ajib, yani. It was like this natural happiness for the first rain of the year, because the animals didn't have too much milk because there's not a lot to eat. And then all of a sudden, within 2 or 3 days, all this greenery starts to grow. And like what seems to be like that desert that can't grow anything. And then all of a sudden, the cattle and the goats, which is primarily what they had, start to be filled with milk, and then they have excess milk, so they're like passing around to everybody and so forth, and it's really ajib, right, to experience that kind of stuff. We're cut off from this oftentimes, and so we have to compensate for that by getting out in nature. And I remember one of our teachers had said that part of his 5 principles of health, one of them is get as much exercise daily outdoors that you possibly can. Get as much exercise outdoors daily that you possibly can. It's preferable than being on a treadmill or a bike or going to a gym or something like that. I'm not saying that's not okay in some circumstances, but get outdoors, it's better. And that be in nature and benefit and get back in touch with your fitrah. Reflect upon the signs, and this is the intention. When you go outside to exercise, outdoors to exercise, first and foremost, make the intention to strengthen yourself for the worship of Allah Ta'ala. And then secondly, make the intention to that unclutter your mind. By being in nature, it helps unclutter your mind. That will then help you then to learn further. And then make the intention to reflect upon Allah Ta'ala's creation. Whatever it is that you can see, whether it's clouds or whether it's mountains or trees, and notice the different seasons and the changes. And now look at spring, Allahu Akbar. All these incredibly beautiful blossoms and everything is happening, everything's regenerating and coming back to life. And then if you're traveling with someone or you're walking with someone, make the intention to spend time with family or friends or something of that nature. And you've just made 4 intentions. And you're doing it, and you'd be surprised how, right, you just get rejuvenated. Some people like to walk early in the morning. Personally, I like to walk in the evenings after like a good day of work, just to get out in nature. And then you can add to that doing your awrad, right? So you're doing your awrad while you're walking out in nature. And subhanAllah, even if you can only do 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it's amazing what it does to you. And how it rejuvenates you and cleanses you. So he goes on to mention a little bit here about our intentions of travel. And so he says that وَمِنْ هَذِهِ الْأَسْبَابِ تَتَبَيُّنُ النِّيَّةُ فِي السَّفَرِ إِنَّ مَعْنَى نِيَّةِ الْإِنْبِعَاثِ السَّبَبَ الْبَعْثِ وَالْإِنْطِهَادِ لِإِجَابَةِ الدَّاعِيَةِ. And what he means by this is that when we understand these various ahkam, that then it becomes clear how it is that we need to make our intention. Because the essence of what your intention is, it's about what motivates you to do what it is that you have set out to do. And that وَلْتَكُنْ نِيَّتُهُ الْآخِرَةِ فِي جَمِيعِ أَسْفَارِهِ. This is where now he's tying travel to the spiritual path. And he says, is that let your intention be the hereafter in everything that you do. Every time you travel, your core intention should be the hereafter. This should be your intention. Let your intention be the hereafter in all of your travels. And he says that this is easy to do in relation to travels that are obligatory and travels that are recommended. And he says that it's not possible to do in travels that are disliked or are unlawful, impermissible, right? Because if you take the metaphor in fiqh, there's things that are najis, that are impure in and of themselves and can't become pure. And then there's things that are mutanajjis, that they've been affected by filth, but you can purify them. So you can't take blood and just add water to it or something and just purify the blood. The blood is najis, or urine, or something like that. It can't become pure. Halas, it's najis. But if you have a garment that was affected with some type of filth, your garment's pure. And now it's become impure. Wash it off and your garment becomes pure. So that things that we shouldn't be doing, especially the haram, is that you can't make a good intention behind that. It's not possible. Is that we are people who are principled in everything that we do. The means has to be principled and the goal has to be principled, right? We cannot steal from the rich to give to the poor. Someone mentioned a joke yesterday, and that this person that stole something from someone and then gave it out in charity. And someone asked him, like, why were you doing that? It's a sin to steal. He said, so when I stole it, I got 1 bad deed. When I gave it out, because Allah multiplies rewards, I got 10 good deeds. So 10 minus 1 is 9. I still have 9 good deeds left. Yani, that's tafkir fasid, yani. You can't think like that. It doesn't work like that. You can't steal from the rich to give to the poor. Right? You can encourage the rich to give to the poor, but don't steal from them. Right? So we are always principled in everything that is that we do. We're principled in terms of the means, just as we're principled in terms of the ends, what it is that we are seeking. And being principled means is that the Sharia is what guides us in everything that is that we do. And so if something, there's a difference of opinion about it, it's makruh or it's permissible, then that's different. It's okay to take the position that it's permissible and then make a good intention behind it. But if something is squarely makruh, disliked, it's a type of prohibition, but it's not so emphatic that there's punishment associated with it, right? That's not something that you can make a good intention for. Okay, so the intention relates to the obligatory, the recommended, and where we really need to work on is the permissible. And so there's a number of different things that we can do, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, to make permissible things acts wherein which that we get reward, where it becomes recommended, and then sometimes that can become an obligation. And the classic one is to what intention do we make to earn a living? Let's really think about that and actively make those intentions. And then what happens is every moment that you spend at work, you're fi sabilillah. One of the really interesting things that Imam al Ghazali does here, after speaking about intention, he levies a scathing critique of the Sufis. And he's speaking to some of the Sufis in his time, which these were people that were claiming tasawwuf but weren't really people of tasawwuf. They were more into the rasum, just in the very formal ways of being associated with him, but they weren't true seekers in the way that it should be. And just as Imam al Ghazali critiques the ulama, he also critiques the people of the spiritual path. And that all different types of people are subject to various types of shortcomings and different things that they do. And he's very critical of those who are wearing the clothes of the Sufis and benefiting from that, the things of being in association with the Sufis, but not truly that being one of them. And then he that goes on to say is that who really is the Sufi? Is that this is something that is not something that is easy. He says, وَأَمَّا التَّصَوُّفْ إِنُّ عِبَارَةٌ عَنْ تَجَرَّدِ الْقَلْبِ لِلَّهِ تَعَالَى وَاسْتِحْقَارِ مَا سِوَى اللَّهِ. That's tasawwuf. And Sufi is not a pejorative word. Erase that from your mind. We shouldn't even need to say this at this point. We should be mature enough to know that. Is that we're not talking about a sect of Islam as some people think, or all these other ridiculous things is that people think about when they hear this word Sufi, right? When you say the word Sufi, you are talking about someone that is taking ihsan, which is 1/3 of the deen, seriously and is realized in it. You can't use the word Sufi for someone who's not realized. It's someone who's moved beyond ilm al-yaqeen, and at very least they've reached the state of ayn al-yaqeen, and they might move up to a state of haqq al-yaqeen, where they've arrived to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and have a higher degree of experiential certainty. And there are people, as he mentions here, is that have completely freed up their hearts and devoted themselves entirely to Allah and have completely turned away from everything other than Allah. That's a Sufi. That is a Sufi. How could you not love someone like that? That's given themselves over to Allah, right? If you want to summarize in Quranic terms, what's a Sufi? قُلِ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ ذَرْهُمْ فِي خَوْدِهِمْ يَلْعَبُونَ. Is that say Allah, and then leave them in that their affairs to just that delve into their worldly affairs. Qulillah. Say Allah and then leave them to delve in their worldly affairs. In other words, is that this is what the Sufi does. Is that he is someone or she is someone who devotes himself entirely to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And so he goes on to critique them about this. And he speaks of this concept of al-akal bid-deen, right? And that that consuming that wealth in the name of the religion. And this is something that is really important because there's very few things that turn people away from religion more than people who are in the robe of religion and doing the formalities outwardly, but are bereft of its internal realities. So he warns us of consuming in the name of the religion. And what he says here is that for this, the cautious are wary of consumption by means of religion. Now, even the person who takes the utmost precaution for his religion never rids himself of imperfections in his inward substance. We all have faults that if people would see them, they might not treat us the same way. If these imperfections were disclosed to someone desiring to support him, then his desire to support him would cool, would wait off, would fade away. So of course they never used to. Okay, the point here is that that's really scary. If someone's given you something based upon their conception of you, but you're bereft of its realities, it might not even be lawful for you in the sacred law to take it. And that's scary. That's really scary, man. Allah Ta'ala protect us and preserve us. And Ya Allah. Allah al-Musta'an. Allah forgive us. So he goes into that tangent about that, but then he goes on to say more about the intention here. And he says, this is beautiful. So one of the Salaf said, Inna Allah Ta'ala qad wakkala bil musafirin malaika yanzurun ila maqasidihim. Allah Ta'ala has that assigned angels over those who are traveling and who monitor their maqasid. What are their aims? What are their goals? فَيُعْطِي كُلَّ وَاحِدٍ عَلَى نَحْوِ نِيَّتِهِ. They give to each one of them according to his intention. فَمَنْ كَانَ نِيَّتُهُ الدُّنْيَا أُعْطِيَ مِنْهَا وَنَقَصَ مِنْ آخِرِ أَضْعَافًا. Whoever's intention is that from the world he'll get something of what he's seeking, but then it will take a multifold amount of reward that he would have received from in the hereafter. وَفُرِّقَ عَلَيْهِ هَمُّهُ. And then is that he'll be filled with worries. وَكَثُرَ بِالْحِرْصِ وَرَغْبَ شُغْلُهُ. And then he'll have more desire for the things of this world. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ نِيَّتُهُ الْآخِرَةُ. Whoever's intending by that travel the hereafter. أُعْطِيَ مِنَ الْبَصِيرَةِ وَالْفِطْنَةِ. As Allah Ta'ala will open up the person's inner sight and give him understanding. وَفُتِحَ لَهُ مِنَ التَّذْكِيرِ وَالْعِبْرِ بِقَدْرِ نِيَّتِهِ. And Allah Ta'ala will disclose to him that many things that he can be aware of and perceive according to his intention. وَجُمِعَ لَهُ هَمُّهُ. And that he will be free of worry. And then the angels will pray for him and seek forgiveness from him. So you see the importance of intention. His whole thing is don't intend to go anywhere other than for the sake of the hereafter. And so just imagine, what if you would die on that travel? You're about to board the plane, you're going somewhere. Don't go anywhere where you would be embarrassed before Allah to die on the way to where you're going. If we think about it like that, it's very easy. And so, let's say you're going to visit your parents 4 hours away, you're going to hop on a plane. That's a very noble intention. You make that intention, Ya Rab, I'm going to visit my parents. So that if you die on the way, you die doing a great act of obedience. Or you're going to Hajj, you're going to learn sacred knowledge or something. That, God forbid, anyone passed away. May Allah protect us all, preserve us all. Alhamdulillah, we've arrived safely. May everybody return safely with no issues. Were someone to pass away on the way to go learn, they die as a martyr and get the reward of a shaheed. They're one of the 90 plus people that when they die, they get a reward of a shaheed. Because our Prophet said, whoever leaves his home to seek sacred knowledge, فَهُوَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ حَتَّى يَرْجَعَ. He's in the path of Allah until he returns. So Allah Ta'ala sends angels, and they're assigned to various types of travelers. And those angels are aware of the intentions of those travelers. And if someone intended through that travel the hereafter, these are all the amazing things that happen. Those angels then are a means to give them basira, that fitna, where you have understanding, and that you'll have an ability to that recollect and to be aware and take lessons from what's happening around you. You'll be worry-free, and then the angels pray for you and seek forgiveness for you. In other words, is that you get abundant blessings. And all of that comes into the intention. And then he has a very important section here where he says, as for the consideration whether traveling or staying in residence is best, should I travel or should I stay put? This resembles the consideration whether solitude or interaction is best. So keep in mind is that the two previous books, one was about having friends and being with people and companionship and so forth, and the book right after that was on solitude. And then the book right after solitude is the book on travel. And so there's no, these aren't in conflict with each other. Everything has to be put in its proper place, and different things could be both right for different people at the same time, even though they manifest in different ways. That's very possible, based upon someone's own circumstance. Just as something could be right for someone at one stage of their life, and then something else be better for them at another stage of their life. And so we don't want to think things in terms in a monolithic way that it's just this one cookie cutter, industrialized way, one size fits all, and that's it. There's an incredible amount of nuance to our deen. And this is why we need to develop our understanding. And this is why we also need to consult and understand deeply the sunnah of decision making and bring it to life. And you will find incredible good in the process of doing this. And so he says that in general, is if we want to think of the most general consideration, he says travel is a form of interaction with an intended increase in labor and difficulties, which unsettles the purpose and disrupts the heart in the case of most people. So travel is not easy. Even in how easy travel has become, it's still difficult, right? Travel is still a qita' min al-adab, a piece of punishment, even in our time. You know, people didn't have jet lag in previous times. Now, it's very minor. Jet lag is usually not that serious. But jet lag is a phenomenon of the modern world, right? That all the different things that we have to do in terms of airports and things of this nature, you're still away from your loved ones when you travel, even if you're in nice accommodations and so forth. So there's a lot of things that still are difficult while we travel, whether it be physically or emotionally. However, he says here, the best in this is whatever most assists religion. So what afdal fi hada ma huwa al-a'wan ala din. What helps us most in our deen, that's what's best for us. And at times it might mean, no, we have to travel. And at times it might be, no, it's better to stay put. So look very carefully, but no, that's the greatest criterion. What should motivate us ultimately is deen. And even if it's a type of permissible travel, attach a righteous intention to it. And then throughout the course of your life, move up in the degrees of better types of travel until you reach the best type of outward travel in the whole time, is that recognizing that the real travel is spiritual travel of the heart. And that's a travel that we embark upon while we're at home and also while we're traveling. And so what helps our deen the most? And then he makes one of these amazing tangents, which is a part of virtually every book, and many times, several times throughout every book of the Ihya. وَنِهَايَةُ ثَمَرَةِ الدِّينِ فِي الدُّنْيَا تَحْصِيلُ مَعْرِفَةِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. Is that the end fruit of the deen in this world is for someone to attain knowledge of Allah Most High. The end result of the greatest fruit of deen, of obeying Allah, submitting to Him, putting the sunnah of our Prophet into practice, is nothing other than tahsil ma'rifatillahi ta'ala, attaining knowledge of Allah. This is the purpose of life. Wa tahsil al-uns bi dhikrillahi ta'ala, in obtaining intimacy in the remembrance of Allah ta'ala. Wal uns yahsul bi dawam al-dhikr. You attain this state of intimacy that through incessantly remembering Allah Ta'ala, constantly being in a state of remembrance. وَالْمَعْرِفَةُ تَحْصُلُ بِدَوَامِ الْفِكْرِ. And knowledge of Allah, gnosis, comes from constant reflection. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَتَعَلَّمْ طَرِيقِ الْفِكْرِ وَذِكْرِ لَمْ يَتَمَكَّنْ مِنْهُمَا. Whoever does not learn the way of reflection and remembrance will never ever be grounded in love or knowledge of Allah. This is what we should be seeking. Ma'rifah and mahabbah. That's all of life. La aish illa aish al-muhibbin. There's no life other than the life of the lovers. This is life. This is the true life. This is the greatest life. This is the most fulfilling life. This is the most rewarding life. This is the greatest life of all for ourselves and anyone else that any human being can possibly attain in this world and the hereafter. And all of the other types of things that human beings like and enjoy and take pride in and love to do or see or whatever else or experience is that they don't equal. I mean, one of our teachers said this one time. All of the different things that we enjoy in the world don't equal a moment were you to enjoy all of them of the bliss and the pleasure and the beauty of the love and knowledge of Allah Ta'ala. That's a reality. And now, no one's making claims that we're experiencing that, but we have to believe that. And if we believe that, then we work towards it. And that's really the affair of all affairs, is how can you and I consistently work towards that? This is what Ilm Tariq al-Akhirah does for us. When you tap into these books, and you understand the message that Imam al Ghazali is trying to teach us, it is a methodology rooted in the Quran and the Sunnah that helps you systematically prepare for the meeting with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. This is what this is all about. And it's rooted in this meaning. The fancy word for it is teleology, i.e., thinking about the end result and consequences of things. Where is this whole thing leading to? And it becomes difficult oftentimes when you're affected by Ghazalian scholarship to be involved in what so many other people are involved in. Because you're always asking yourself, what's the point of it? Where is this? Where are you going with this? Right? What are you trying to accomplish by this? But that's the whole point. The more we're realized and we learn it from its true masters and it starts to seep into the heart, let alone penetrate, then everything starts to change for us. We start to conceive of things differently. We start to make decisions accordingly, differently. Our relationships change. What we're willing to do changes. What we don't do changes. Why? Because we're starting to think of, and this is the whole reason we've been given an intellect, is to think about these things. Whereas the nature of desire is it just wants to live in the moment and experience that fleeting pleasure. But that is not what fulfills us as human beings. This is right at the heart of what he's trying to teach us. So, وَالسَّفَرُ هُوَ الْمُعِينَ عَلَى التَّعَلُّمِ فِي الْإِبْتِدَاءِ. So this is important, is that travel helps us to learn in the beginning. وَالْإِقَامَ هِيَ الْمُعِينَ عَلَى الْعَمَلِ بِالْعِلْمِ فِي الْإِنْتِهَاءِ. And taking residence assists us in putting our knowledge into practice in the end. So it does oftentimes happen that people spend time traveling early on. And I even know from our teachers is that they tend to travel less now than they did before. And this is especially, and you can even, we shouldn't analyze it from this perspective, but if you look at like the Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership, the number one job of the level 5 leader is to create level 4 leaders who then become level 5 leaders as they move up for these different reasons that people that follow leadership because they have to, because they want to, and all these things. And then but what is that? That's tarbiyah. That's just a modern way of Imam al Ghazali asking, like, why didn't you write any books? And he says, Ashabi ta'lifi. My students are my books. Right? They authored rijal, great men and women. This is what they authored. And nothing is more important. Yes, it doesn't mean that we don't write books. We write books and we contribute that way as well. But the whole goal is that there be individuals that carry on this work in the next generation. And this is something that, for all of the good that's happening in the Muslim community in the United States of America, there's abundant good. And things are increasing and things are expanding. There's a lot of khair. But one of the big gaps is right here. Very few people have understood this. If we truly understood this, we would allocate our resources in a different way. It's much easier to get people to support things that are flashy and kind of have a appeal, and especially they kind of tie into the celebrity culture, and so it's so much easier to get support for those types of things. But actually doing the sometimes monotonous work of day in and day out and nurturing human souls and mentoring them and helping them, that's the best investment of all. And then sometimes, subhanAllah, you spend 5 years on someone, 10 years on someone, and then they go somewhere else, they do something else, and you lose them. And subhanAllah, right? Think about it, that everything that it is that you have to learn to then go back and to be able to be a source of guidance for a community. It's not easy. There's a lot that goes into it. And there's a portion of learning. There's a portion of self-discipline and that transformation and development of sincerity, just as there's an portion of that apprenticeship in learning the theory and knowledge component of da'wah and service, and then practicing and that being mentored and asking questions and so forth and so on. Till then, okay, now you're ready. And this work is not easy. It's backbreaking. And you have to be willing to give it 100% of yourself. And you're not going to have a normal life. And you're not going to get paid very much. So who's ready to do the work? Okay. It doesn't sound very appealing to me. It's not very appealing outwardly. And there are some perks here and there. But when you get down to the nitty-gritty, very few people can do it. Very few people can do it. And it's why that they go through these trainings to like become a Marine or something like that. They have these intense trainings because they want to weed out the faint-hearted, because they know that you can't do this work. You're not ready to do this work. And if someone can't be on time to classes and do a suluk tracker that's for the awam, that's for common Muslims, everybody should be doing those things. It's on the suluk tracker. And that actually review for their work, and then you're not fit to that be in front of the community to help them. And this, though, despite it seemingly to be not so appealing, is the most rewarding and greatest work of all. And oftentimes that's not realized until the last moments of their life. But then the stories that you hear, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, about these people who lived a life, and the vast majority of people went to the dunya just for focusing on their worldly life. It's not a bad thing, but some of them had opportunities and they didn't take those opportunities. But then you hear these stories of people who that actually did live that life, how they die, and what happens, and the way that they're received by the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I don't know, story after story. Reaches the one of Tawatu. You heard so many different stories of people that were like this from your own shuyukh and from other shuyukh and people that died at a young age and so forth. And you're like, oh, all those things that don't seem so appealing, that's the real life. That's how I want to live. Even if people think I'm boring, even if people think that I'm too strict, or even if people that wonder why I don't do this or that, or why I don't go here, or I don't go there, that when someone dies and they go and they see what happens in the hereafter, and if you've pleased Allah and you've become beloved to Him, la ilaha illallah, what is Allah Ta'ala going to give you in the hereafter? What's it going to be like to have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam be there to greet you and to be with him? And then if the Prophet loves you, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, everybody loves you. All the angels love you. All the other prophets love you. That his family loves you, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His companions love you. All the great imams of the deen love you. Everybody loves you. If the Prophet loves you, everybody loves you. And the Prophet loves you, Allah loves you. SubhanAllah. And just imagine if the best of creation loves you, and then you get to sit with Imam al-Shafi and Imam al Ghazali and Imam al-Suyuti and all these other great imams and so forth. SubhanAllah. What is it going to be like to experience these things in paradise? But this gets back to our intention right here and in the now. So he goes into this to encourage us to use our time wisely in general. This is a theme of the Ihya. But then in particular, when it comes to travel, let's make sure first and foremost, the first step is our travel is permissible. And then start making righteous intentions and move up in the degrees of the different types of travel. And then preemptively figure out what are the great ways that we can actually benefit from travel. And one of them is doing exactly what you all have done, is traveling from distances to come to learn these meanings and to be together and to worship together and to be with good people. And that this, inshallah ta'ala, will that stabilize your deen from the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the barakah of the books that we are reading, and from the blessing of the teachers that are behind this work. As that, inshallah ta'ala, there'll be immense benefit, some of which you might perceive, most of which you probably won't perceive, that here and now in the immediate, and then in the long term, and then in the future, and that's just in this world. But then inshallah ta'ala, from the barakah of our shuyukh, there'll be realities of these gatherings and this time that we spend together that we experience in the hereafter. And just before, when the soul reaches the gharghara, the last bit where at that point it's too late for us to make tawbah, and then inshallah ta'ala in hereafter, from the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what we hope for. And anything that is done for His sake is that this will be what happens from His bounty, not because of anything that we do. May Allah ta'ala give us tawfiq, ya arhamar rahimin. So to continue the discussion of etiquettes, Ustad Amjad that outlined the first few that are important for any time that it is that we travel. And again, these etiquettes are the way that the type of travel that is permissible, and then in the section that moves up to recommended and its degrees to obligation and so forth, is that this is what keeps us protected while we are traveling, to make sure that our travel is a part of this way of life where we are systematically preparing for the hereafter. So this is really important. As for if we just kind of do whatever it is that we want to do and that don't think about any of these things, you will find is that sometimes you get harmed by your travel. And one of the things that you will realize is how important the dhikr, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is while we travel. This is why there's so many different invocations. So we had a bullet point that discussed that. But then even in these other points that he's making, he's going to mention other adhkar. And it takes quite a bit of time to actually learn all of these. But if we have them in one place, then we slowly say them until we can memorize them, inshallah ta'ala. So what he mentions here as numbers 6 and 7, we didn't number them here, and I mentioned this because we combine both of these as choosing the right time to travel. He mentions a beautiful point here, and so we'll mention what he says and then tie it into how this will manifest in our time. Is that as-sadis and yarhala min al-manazil bukratan, is that he encourages us to leave early in the morning. And he mentions a hadith of our Prophet ﷺ, that says, Allahumma barak li ummati fi bukuriha, that may Allah Ta'ala place blessing for my ummah in the first part of the day. And the commentaries on this hadith says, this relates to talab al-ilm, seeking sacred knowledge. The best time to seek sacred knowledge is in the morning. And unfortunately, that our seminary starts at 8:30. And inshallah ta'ala, the students don't know this, the first time I'm divulging this, but once we're able to have dorms on site, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, please make dua for us. It's hoping that eventually, then the whole schedule is going to change. Because the best time to study is right after Fajr. And this is how we did it when we studied in Dar Mustafa, is that pray Salat al-Fajr, you do a few awrad, weird al-Latif, and then you do a class all the way until sunrise. And then you have 2 more classes. You have a break then and have breakfast, and then you're off until Dhuhr. And then you might or might not, depending upon have a class after Dhuhr, and then you have 2 classes in the evening. The point here is that this is the very best time to study. And it's a little bit more difficult because of other factors and so forth, and people living off campus, but that's really the ideal schedule. Not everyone is a morning person, but this hadith that indicates is that for talab al-ilm, but also for other things that we do, for travel, and for that even going out to earn a living, is that there's blessing in the morning. And you and I all know experientially, when we get to bed in good time, and we don't waste our time at night, and we get up and we stay up after Fajr, and we start doing something, how much more do we get done? Even if we're doing something as mundane as like cleaning our house, as opposed to going back to sleep, waking up, and then trying to get back up again. How much time do we end up wasting? Now, for us, it is more of a challenge, right? In the winter months, that's easier. Now we're past daylight savings, and now Isha's getting later, and you got to be careful now, right? Because it's ideal that we get fully ready for bed before Salat al-Isha. Don't save things to after Salat al-Isha, or else you're going to get to bed very late. Get everything ready ahead of time. Pray Salat al-Isha. We pray here now at 9:15. Soon it's going to be 9:30. Then go to bed. Right? Otherwise, you're going to get to bed too late. And you're already having to get up to bed up earlier because Fajr's getting earlier just as Isha is getting later. And so we have to be aware of the effects that for us that our longitude has, or latitude has on the prayer times. And to make sure that we get up in time and benefit from the early part of the day. And then he says that it's actually recommended to begin a travel on Thursday. And this was the sunnah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, if we're able to implement that khair, and that if not, that it doesn't mean it's impermissible to travel on another day. The only exception here is Jummah. And in the Shafi'i school, it is impermissible to travel after Fajr on the day of Jummah, unless that you plan to pray Jummah that during your travel. So you have to leave before Fajr. And it's the same thing for breaking your fast. Is that if you leave before Fajr, khair, but if you leave after Fajr, you have to remain fasting. And so if you leave after Fajr in the Shafi'i school, you have to pray Jummah on the road, wherever it is that you are going. And there are opinions in the Maliki school and so forth, but this is the recommendation. And what you could do then is, and it's a little bit more difficult, but it's better. We try to do this. If there's ever a travel that you have to do on Friday that you know you're not going to make Jummah, then what we would do is, like if we have to fly out of Newark from here, you spend the night in Newark. So you leave Thursday night. Then you spend the night in Newark. Your travel has already started, so it's permissible. And that these things are good to do to protect your deen. So Jummah is the exception there. And just as that at-tashyi' lil-wada' sunnah. So just as it's sunnah to bid farewell to family and friends, this is a good thing to do. And especially your parents. It's a very good thing before all of our travels to seek the permission of our parents and specifically bid farewell to them. And that benefit from their du'as that during the travels that they will surely make for us. But it's also recommended to walk out with those who are traveling, to walk them to the door, or to walk them to the car or whatever else, and to bid them farewell. And then he says here, وَأَنْ لَا يَنْزِلْ حَتَّى يَحْمَى النَّهَارِ. And so he says that not to get down from your riding beast, and this is assuming pre-modern travel on a donkey or a horse or a camel or something like this, until it gets warm during the day. So to travel early, and then as it gets warm during the day, then is that you rest for a couple hours. And I remember more time, this is what you do. You would go to close to Dhuhr time, to maybe about, you'd leave right at sunrise, and you would travel till maybe around 11:30, 12 o'clock, and then you would, in the shade, rest for about sometimes 2.5 hours. And then as it got a little bit cooler, then you're back on the road. And this is especially in places where there's intense heat, like in the Saharan desert and the closer that you get to the equator and so forth. But this is a consideration. Now, this might or might not apply to us in terms of how we travel nowadays, but it's just worth mentioning. And then he mentions du'as that you say is that when you are about to reach where it is that you are going. And you can access those in the book, inshallah ta'ala. And just as that once you reach where it is that you are intending, is that the sunnah is to that pray 2 rakats of sunnah, two sunnah rakats. So let's just say you're traveling to where are you traveling to? Istanbul. You reach your hotel in Istanbul. One of the first things that you should do when you get into your room is to locate the qibla. Find out put your stuff down, locate the qibla. Where's the qibla? And then after getting your stuff sorted, pray 2 rakats. Sunnah to pray 2 rakats that where you've arrived to. And then if you're supposed to spend 4 days in Istanbul and 3 days in Bursa, wherever, just mentioning names of cities. Then once you reach your hotel in Bursa, you pray another 2 rakats. Hakada, familiarize yourself with the qibla and so forth. And then he gives us du'as that when nightfall happens, there's du'as for nightfall. And then there's du'as that we say when we that go up and are that ascending in travel. And there's du'as that we say when we're descending. So for us, that when the flight's taking off or when it is descending and landing, there's du'as. And in general, we make takbir when we are going up, and when we're coming down, we make tasbih. And then there's du'as of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we have the next bullet point, which is taking precautions while traveling. So it's beneficial. What he says here is that it's good to take precautions and, be careful about your things. People have things stolen from them all the time. Don't just leave things out where people can grab them or steal them. Just learn to be responsible, right? Teach your children to be responsible, to take care of their belongings. But be careful for coming down too hard on them. And I remember this happened to me one time. One of my children that left a bag. Actually, what did they do? No, they left their bag somewhere. And it had a tasbih that one of the shuyukh gave me. And I was like, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. So I wasn't too happy with this child, right? I came down a little bit too hard on him. And then, subhanAllah, we were going through Chicago and we had to change planes. And it was right after I kind of came down hard on him. And then I realized, la hawla wa la quwwata billah, I left my bag on the plane. And then immediately I was like, astaghfirullah. And I apologized to my child. If you're wrong as a parent, you have to apologize. I was like, I shouldn't have come down that hard on you, right? But I had to go run back and quickly get my bag. And alhamdulillah, I got it and then come back. And I just realized quickly, don't come down to, you'll fall into, if you condemn someone for what they've done, you'll fall into that same thing. So don't come down too hard on people for it. Right? Yes, you can give them tarbiyah and say, look, son, you need to be more responsible and kada. But don't reach the point where you go to excess and you come down too hard on them, because then, boom, it's going to come right back to you. Literally. Minutes later, I was like, I left my bag on the plane. So, anyhow, we never got that tasbih back, but we did get other ones later, though, alhamdulillah. So, he says, take precautions. And so he's saying, in the days when you used to travel with a caravan, don't walk alone, far from the caravan, right? And that take precautions and be aware of your surroundings. When you go into a hotel, be aware of your surroundings, and that certain places are not good to go out at certain times. If you know there's certain times where this is when people have been partying, they're coming back from the clubs and whatever else, and that's not a time to be out, right? That's our New Year's Eve, and I know Sabra's here, at RAS, right? That's not the time to go down to the lobby, right, on New Year's Eve, right? Plan yourself ahead of time, stay in your hotel, and khalas, right? They have a good khidmah team. They'll bring you whatever it is that you need, and khalas. Yani, plan your stuff out. Don't put yourself in a situation where people coming back after doing whatever, and then you see things you don't want to see, or experience what you don't want to see, and music is blasting and people are partying and stuff like that. Khalas. That take precautions. Use your brain. Think through things, and that protect people that you're traveling with, and that if you're going to send your children on errands and so forth and so on. So all of this relates to that taking precautions. And then that he says here, and this is really beautiful. He says, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إذا نام في ابتداء الليل في السفر افترش ذراعه. So a prophet, if he that went to sleep in the early part of the night, in the beginning of the night while he's traveling, is that he would sleep right on his arm, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's sunnah, to sleep on his arm like this, and he'd be lying on his side. Right, his pillow would be his arm. And then وإذا نام في آخر الليل نصب ذراعه نصبا. So then, if he slept at the latter part, he'd sleep like this. So he wouldn't put his head down on the ground. He would yansib. He would put his elbow up like this and sleep. If he slept a little bit before Fajr, because it's a lot easier to wake up when you're sleeping like that. So this is something like essential oils are really nice to help you go to sleep. Like lavender is amazing. There's no need for NyQuil or taking anything else for sleeping pills and things for most people. Some people need medication, but most people, lavender is amazing. And then petitgrain, another one's amazing. Really helps you. But if you have to wake up at a certain time, it's not a good idea, right? Because you really sleep well with these things. Right, so be cognizant of what it is that you do. And if you know that there's like 2 hours until Fajr, it might have to be like, look, you got to stay up. Because you know if we both sleep, we're not waking up. You stay up while I'm going to sleep, and then I'll let you sleep while if I have to stay up at a later time, something like that. But plan these things. Because look what he says here. This is really beautiful. He says, وَالْغَرَضْ مِنْ ذَلِكَ أَلَّا يَسْتَثْقِلْ فِي النَّوْمِ. The whole purpose of this is you don't sleep so heavily. فَتَطْرَعَ الشَّمْسُ وَهُوَ نَائِمٌ. Is that the sun rises and you're sleeping. لَا يَدْرِي فَيَكُونْ مَا يَفُوتُ مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ أَفْضَلَ مِمَّا يَطْلُبُ سَفَرًا. And then what he missed by missing that prayer would be that significantly greater than anything that you would attain that through that travel, even if you're going to Hajj. Missing one prayer, right, is that what you've missed is significantly greater than anything you're going to attain. One prayer. It's that serious. And I'm always amazed. I'm going to have personal done that all the Muslims are just praying in their seats and we don't see them when we're on flights with them. But it's really shocking. I mean, how many people almost think, I'm on a plane, I don't have to pray. Of course you have to pray, right? You have to pray regardless of where you are. Now with standing, my advice is for men and women, if you can, to always stand, even on a flight. Allah will make it easy for you. If you can't for some reason, pray sitting down, and then after that, make up your prayer. But try to pray standing if you can. If you have a respectful place of doing so and you're able to do so, and the planes are different. With domestic flights, my advice really is, especially that even if you have to spend a little bit more money, to book flights where you don't have to pray on the planes. And it takes a little bit of finesse and so forth, but usually you can do that. And that's where you actually want to have connecting flights sometimes, especially if you're traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast, or like the corner of Florida to Seattle, or LA to Boston or something. These are long flights. Try to get a connecting flight where you can stop, pray, and then get back on the plane and so forth. Think about these things. And this is the principle, is that you don't want to miss a single prayer. Otherwise, what you've missed is significantly greater than everything that you're seeking through that travel, even if it's for a religious reason. And then he gives us anything that you fear, any type of enemy, or in those days, a predatory beast. You come across a lion or a tiger in the jungle or something, or a human form of it. But yaqra, he gives us a number of things to recite. Ayatul Kursi, just remember Ayatul Kursi. Recite Ayatul Kursi all of the time. When you enter into your home, when you exit your home, regularly, Ayatul Kursi. It's one of the greatest forms of protection. And when you fear, it's mujarrab during travel, there's something you fear. A shady situation or something. Li'ilafi Quraysh. Li'ilafi Quraysh ilahim. Rahlata shita'i wa sayf. Recite that during your travel. And he lists a number of different things that we can say for protection. So we got to wrap it up here. I know we're out of time. I'm almost done. And then he says, the ninth thing here is, and we left this general as observing the sacred law, but he literally says, and to be gentle with your riding animal. And this is amazing. Don't put too much on your riding animal than more than it can bear. And he says, and never hit the animal too hard or in the face. This is prohibited. And he says, don't sleep on the riding animal such that it gets harmed. And he says that the people of wara, of scrupulousness, wouldn't sleep on their riding animals unless that they dozed off. And our Prophet ﷺ said is that don't take the backs of animals as couches, and let them rest in the morning and in the evening. This is sunnah. And then he mentions these beautiful things, like when you're renting a riding animal, and this can apply to that other things that we rent or use. So like if, let's just say that you're renting a car, for instance, you have to be very careful how you use that car. Sometimes rental cars, it's like people just, I'm going to drive it however I want to drive it. You're peeling out and doing all kinds of stuff you'd never do in your car. That could reach the point of being prohibited, Yani. Right? Because that's not what is understood. If they would see you driving the car like that, even though it's a company, what would they say? Right? It doesn't mean that if it's a 55, you can't drive 57, right? But Yani, it just has to be customarily how we use it. Like these things are important, right? If you go into a restaurant and you take 50 napkins, right? Because you just want a stack of napkins, or take 10 forks. No, you can take what is customarily okay for you to take. And it reaches a certain point where if you take too much, it becomes haram. And I started thinking about, and I want to consult about, right, sneaking heavy things on a plane without them knowing. I started to really consider whether that is even permissible or not. Anyhow, people of water would do things there. And so someone, when they would rent an animal, they would rent it of the cost, saying that they would never get down from the riding animal. And so they would cost more, but then they would actually let the animal rest. So it was a hidden form of charity in ihsan. They've paid for it, and this was how they chose to do it. And then he says, وَمَنْ آذَى الدَّابَّةَ بِضَرْبٍ أَوْ حَمْلٍ مَا لَا يَطِيقُ. Whoever harms an animal by hitting it, or that causing it to carry that which is unable to carry, طُولِبَ بِهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Look at the beauty of our deen. He'll be taken to account for this Yawm al-Qiyamah. And every living thing, that there is hisab, there's reckoning for every living thing. And look at this. This is amazing. Abu Darda, the great companion, he said to a camel that he owned, that as he was getting close to death, Ayyuha al-ba'ir, O camel, la tukhasibni ya rabbak. Is that, don't take me to account before your Lord. فَإِنِّي لَمْ أَكُنْ أَحْمِلُكَ فَوْقَ طَاقَتِكَ. I've never put more than what you could bear on your back. This is how they're in tune. He's speaking to his camel and saying, don't ask for any of your rights, Yawm al-Qiyamah. I've never put on you more than what you could bear. SubhanAllah. And then he mentions some very beautiful things here about the benefits of rest and so forth and so on. And that's a whole other dimension of things we should do while we travel, is that exercise and to get up if you're sitting for too long, and to walk around and to stretch and to get a little bit of movement. These things are all important. And then he talks about the things that we should carry, and we'll end on this and postpone inward etiquettes until tomorrow. He talks about the things that we should carry. And so the Prophet ﷺ, if he traveled, would carry with him 5 things: a mirror, a kohol jar, a midra, which is like a pick, like a wooden stick pick, a siwak, which is a toothstick or a toothbrush, wal misht, or you could say musht, a comb. These would be the things. In another narration, it would be 6 things. And added to that was a qarura, some form of a bottle. And these are the things that our Prophet ﷺ would travel with. And Imam al Ghazali says, in that the righteous added to that a rakwa, which is some type of what we call probably a bucket, a container of some sort, and a habal, a rope. And so we should really think about this, is that there's items that you and I are going to need. I would add to that list in our time a compass, because a compass is going to help you find the qibla. I try to always travel with a compass, And I do use the compass on my phone, and there's different ways, and we're talking about this tomorrow, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. But sometimes these phones are much more easily affected by metal and other things. You can get false readings on the compass. Whereas you got an actual compass, the only thing you kind of want to be aware of there is potentially what true north is from that magnetic north. But even then, if you take the position of it's just the jihad, the general direction, you're fine. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow. But a compass is something that I would encourage people to. And I'd also say that some form of istinja bottle, so otherwise known as a loti or something of that nature, that some type of thing, and that could be, they have different types of things, something to clean yourself with. And they tend to work better, especially if they like spray in a certain way and so forth, and just use like a plastic bottle. Anything can be used, but prepare ahead of time. And prepare for this because you're going to be using bathrooms and they're not Muslim friendly always. They don't have bidets attached and this type of thing and little bottles for you to use. You have to bring your own thing, right? And that, yes, there's a part of the fiqh of having to clean yourself in public bathrooms and so forth, but sometimes it's wajib to use water. And so you want to prepare for that. So I would add that. And I would probably add in our time as well, like something like a prayer mat because of the type of places that we have to pray, even though that you can assume things to be that pure until otherwise noted. But this is one of the things why these shawls are really amazing, right? You could write like a small little treatise on these shawls. These shawls, like we could like count the uses right now for these shawls because they could be used as prayer mats. They can be used as they can be used as towels or handkerchiefs, which is a little bit gross, but it could be used for a handkerchief. It could be used as a pillow. It could be used as a blanket. It can be used as a habwa. It could be used as a turban if you wanted to like cover your head. There's so many different uses for these things, and they're just really, really useful. So maybe we add a shawl to it. And there might be a few other things. And you can just think about, in other words, prepare for your travel. What are the things that I need? And obviously we have other items like, credit cards and things like this that we need and so forth, and setting up your phone plans. So there's other technical things to think about. The point here is think about what it is that you're going to need when you travel and prepare ahead of time. If you tend to get headaches, then you might want to bring a little bit of medicine. Think about the various things that you need to prepare practically for your travel, and specifically those things that are going to help you in your deen and the things that there might not be readily available in the places that you're going. So we will stop there. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. The section that we didn't reach was the adab. Sorry, there's one on returning. So we'll do this tomorrow about returning from travel and inward etiquettes, and then get into what one must know for travel. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq and bless us in all of our affairs. I apologize for going over. May Allah ta'ala give us the greatest of openings and give us fiqh and understanding of this religion. Ya Arhamar Rahmeen. And to give us tawfiq for all good. Ya Dhal Jalali wal Ikram. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I'm going to jump in. I know Dr. Yasser is going to say it, but let's make a very quick transition. I know we went over because we got to start the interactive session very soon. So we're going to make a very quick transition. We're going to call the adhan, pray right away, and then brothers in here first. All right, we got to do a very quick transition. Bismillah. Someone call the adhan.